a lot of our clients don't need somebody that is senior level full time.
Right.
Just, you don't need a lot of that stuff anymore. Now, from a development angle, we do mostly WordPress. So yes, we're going to be hiring mostly our full-time staff are going to be WordPress developers. But in reality, there's so many other areas of that technology stack. When you're starting to look at the business from a high level, how do you get these systems interconnected with each other? You need very particular specialists in all those different areas, but you just need a fraction of their time.
On today's episode of The Claw, I speak with Chris LaFay. He is the CEO of Classic City Consulting. They are a partner to Liger Partners, working in the technology space of making sure that you build a website that actually does something. It shouldn't just be brochureware. We're going to talk a little bit about teams and what you need to do as a marketing executive to understand how to talk to all of those crazy technology people. Because regrettably, to do marketing nowadays, you have to. So tune in as Chris and I discuss teams and the best way to really make your marketing sing. Welcome to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist of Liger Partners. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I am joined today by Chris LaFay. He is the CEO. Is that what you call yourself?
Yes.
Okay, CEO of Classic City. So, Chris, tell me a little bit about what Classic City does.
Yeah, so we are a marketing and web specialist, and we mostly work with clients on defining how their website can be their hub and how to slowly make their marketing engine work and then work better over time. And so once we define what that website looks like, how that's going to function, what are your sales and marketing goals, and then grow from there, again, using your website as that primary hub that people sometimes forget about.
And I have known you for a hot minute, and I've always been curious about this, so I'm going to ask you now, where did you come up with the name Classic City?
So I went to the University of Georgia,
okay,
and Athens is called the Classic City. And so I have also surrounded myself with a lot of alliterative people. And so I was trying to figure out what sort of alliteration I could make with my company name that didn't completely keep me in the web arena forever.
Yeah.
And so wanted to make it a little bit generic, wanted to pay a little bit of homage to UGA because I loved my time there. And thus Classic City Consulting happened. And I actually think people in Athens don't like me too much because I own all the domain names around Classic City. I've just collected them over the years. So now I own that intellectual property a little bit now. So it's great.
Okay. Well, Classic City is partnered with Liger. So Liger does marketing, and we primarily focus on B2B. And we do also research, and we also have a technology piece. And we use Classic City to help us with the implementation of some of the technology components. Because if you don't know it yet, marketing is very heavily a technology thing nowadays. Yes. It's not just about a pretty picture that, looks good or a message. You've got to also have the ability to deliver that message.
Exactly.
And one of the reasons that we partner with Classic City is that, if you think about the type of talent you have to have in place to do the different things, our talent is around creative ideas and design, and we've got some technology chops, but not as deeply as it relates to like all the things you need to have. Like I tell people when they think they can hire a marketing person, I'm like, well, you need more than one. You need about like 18 people to do all the things that you need to do. And when you get on the technology side, I mean, it's true too. There's so many different skill sets.
And there's also so many different systems that are used across a company. I mean, any C-level person, look at your bills and look at all the little micro $20, $100, $200 a month charges that you're getting. You have Slack, you have your CRM, you have your email system, you have so many other things. And a really well-running marketing machine has all those things connected. There's no silver bullet system, right, that just you can run your entire business from. It'd be great if that could exist, but it wouldn't be good.
It'd be expensive, and what if it went down? And
exactly.
All those kind of things, yeah.
And so one of the things that we're doing on a consistent basis is I call it our talent network. And I'm constantly interviewing people that are designers and developers at least once or twice a week on various different skill sets. And so if we need somebody that's good at HubSpot and we don't have a HubSpot person, we'll put that on the list. And so we always are growing our bench of freelancers and notating whether or not they want to potentially become full-time employees. Some of our partners might need those people more than we do. And so if one of our partners needs a full-time person with a particular skill set, we have that at our disposal.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I feel like is missing from a lot of just, especially technology agencies with coding. There's a lot of developers out there. Some of them are really good, some of them are really bad. And trying to figure out who those are that are really good and have kind of a pulse and a beat on what their status is on a regular basis, so you know who you can pull from in an instant.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the conversation of, I talk about Liger not being an agency, we're a firm, and it's purposeful because agencies are more kind of the Don Draper Mad Men, let me give you a big idea. Are we really good at one thing? They're like, oh, let me sell you social media because we're great at social media. And we want to holistically look at the business and understand what does the business need.
Exactly.
And then we have a little bit of a staff aug model on the back end because you might need a really high-powered designer at the beginning, but then you could move that over to production. And I tell people I'm a recovering technologist, so I used to run development shops, and it's similar on the technology side, right? I mean, you've got like people with different, and they don't like to do the other stuff.
Exactly. You find your people that are very honed down and specific in what they like. And that's the nice thing about having this kind of, like you said, like this pseudo augmentation model is a lot of our clients don't need somebody that is senior level full time.
Right.
Just, you don't need a lot of that stuff anymore. Now, from a development angle, we do mostly WordPress. So yes, we're going to be hiring mostly our full-time staff are going to be WordPress developers and designers because that's the bulk of what we do. But in reality, there's so many other areas of that technology stack. When you're starting to look at the business from a high level, how do you get these systems interconnected with each other? You need very particular specialists in all those different areas, but you just need a fraction of their time. And so for me, spending my time working on introducing myself to those people, learning, do they like freelance? What does their schedule look like? What are they wanting to get out of work in general? Allows me as a business owner to have a big leg up on the competition because now I have this, I'm not a staffing company by any stretch of the imagination, but I now have a group of people that I can call on in a moment's notice about that really weird request. And now I can say yes with confidence because I've interviewed this person. I've talked to them before. It's great.
Yeah, we're set up as a bow tie model. So we have Ligers, so they're W-2 employees who do all the things that they're part of the business, account management, all client success, all those kind of things fall in that category. And then we have Liger Giggers, and those are people who we need just for a period of time, but we know they're really good, and we know they know how to deliver within our framework, which is a huge deal, right?
Yeah.
And as you think about it from a technology perspective, it's an interesting stat, and it's old now. I don't remember when I heard it last, but I think it was like pre-pandemic, which means it's ancient, is that the CMO now controls more technology than the CTO in most businesses. And most CMOs don't know a lot about technology.
No.
They're like, I didn't go to school for that, right?
Exactly. I mean, because I'm relatively
back in
young.
the day.
Back in the day, right? I didn't really want to say that, but here we are. But a lot of these systems didn't exist.
Right.
You had Excel and Microsoft Access. I mean, I remember projects we did back in the early 2000s where we had to integrate Microsoft Access with a front-facing website. And man, that was difficult.
Yeah.
I do not want to go back and relive those days by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
But having those specialists that you can call on, and as that marketing officer, you also have to know what's happening with sales, obviously. Right. And if you can line up your technology stack with what your salespeople want to go out and target, and then if your website's that hub that all this stuff interconnects into and you're driving traffic to your website, you can control what that potential customer sees.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're relying on all these various different third parties for that initial sales discussion, you're not going to have nearly as much control in the long term.
Yeah. And so in picking teams and looking at the right, because that's a challenge, right? Like as a marketing person in particular, I'm out trying to figure out how am I, what am I going to rely on technology for? What am I going to use within marketing? Like what are those pieces? Because this has now become a bigger part of my job. And when I went to school, I thought I was, going to learn about communication methods and things like that, right? So What are some of the tips and tricks that you've run into as you start to uncover technologists? And what might a company need to keep as part of their team versus what might be smart to outsource?
So one of the first things that we've realized probably over the last year and a half or so, because we've done a lot of growth over the last 18 months, more rapidly than expected. And one of those things was getting our processes down from in everybody's head onto paper, because we've added a lot of new team members. Haven't had turnover, we've just grown.
Right.
And so I realized myself and a couple of other key people on my team, they're having the exact same conversations about the same basics over and over. And it was taking hours and days of time. And so one of the biggest things that we've done is created this ridiculously, probably way over-engineered because I did it, this operations manual that walks through everything from how to record a Loom video that's quality to showcase like walking through tutorials, all the way down to how we handle like repositories for code, how do we structure our design files so that no matter who is working on which element, everything remains the same.
Yeah.
And that's really key when you're working with a lot of part-time folks, because you want them to do what they're good at and be efficient, but they also need to bend a little bit into working within that system.
We had that exact conversation this week. So like, how do you bring a gigger on and then make sure that they really understand how the company works and where things are? Like, we've had this joke around the company for years of like, where is that? Like, where is that thing? And who is that liger, right? Like, who does what? Like, who are these people? Interestingly, you're more of like a process-driven leader, and I'm more of like, why don't you understand where this is, leader?
And part of it,
which is why I've surrounded myself with people who are like, okay, so now we have to document this thing, right?
And that's exactly what I've done as well. I am a little bit more like, I've actually realized this week, we're talking about some of our own internal marketing, and I have been verbalizing my ideas to my team and saying, this is the vision that I want to do for our own marketing. And it's hit a wall.
Right.
And I never understood why. And I realized earlier this week, I haven't visualized it yet. I haven't put it on paper. I've been trying to paint a picture with words, but the team that I was working with is very visual. So I created this humongous chart, didn't take me too long, that visualized the interconnectivity of everything. And within 30 minutes, they're like, oh, we got it.
Yeah.
And it's the same idea with the whole operations manual, is if you can write it down, you can show what you're doing and show your work, basically, then getting those people into how you work. And also it kind of is a litmus test on culture fit too.
Right.
Because if they fit into the process, that's not the whole thing, don't get me wrong, but if they understand the process, they're willing to work within it, that's at least one step towards are they a good culture fit for the company longer term as well.
Yeah. And so talking to people who are running marketing. So I'm running marketing, I'm working for this company, and now all of a sudden I realize like there's all this technology involved. Have you seen any best practices around what should I as the marketing team feel like I should own? And what are the things maybe I shouldn't?
I think it really depends on the size of the business that you run and where you're willing to spend time onboarding and building that talent network for yourself. And so when I work with smaller companies, I'm more interested on them figuring out the people that can do the minute execution and can follow a plan. And so, because these are the people that are probably a little bit less expensive than your full-time senior types of folks. And so we tell them, hey, come to us with your sales goals. We'll help you with the strategy and help kind of create these blueprint structures for you that you can kind of rinse and repeat and copy and paste and move forward.
Right.
And as long as you're following the checklists, you're going in the right direction. But the larger that company gets, if they don't want to have the right staff members in place, they don't want to take the time to continue building that pipeline, because I build my talent network with mostly developers and designers, project managers. If they don't want to continue building out their marketing team pipeline for when somebody inevitably leaves, then they need to give that over to somebody else who can take their vision and their strategy, help hone that in a little bit, and actually create an actionable plan, and then allow that other company to then do the execution of it so that it actually happens.
Okay. Well, we're going to go to commercial break. When we get back, I'm going to break it down into some more granular pieces and how you think about building a team that's maybe both owned, but also maybe you're relying on externally to kind of put that marketing stack together, right? Because that's marketing people are just like, why did I end up with all the technology, right? I'm a recovering technologist, so I'm like, hey, I know how it works, but I'm on the marketing side now, right? So, all right, we'll be back in just a second. You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist with Liger Partners. I'm talking today with Chris LaFay with Classic City, which is named after Athens, War Eagle. So we'll be back in just a minute.
The Claw podcast is brought to you by Liger Partners. Liger Partners is a premier marketing firm where we save the world from boring, broken marketing. We get underdogs recognition because you deserve it. For more information, go to ligerpartners.com and follow us on all social media platforms at Liger Partners.
And we're back. You're listening to The Claw. It is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I am talking today with a good friend of Liger, Classic City Consulting CEO, Chris LaFay. With Liger, we have a partnership model. So we have people who are Ligers, then we have Liger Giggers. Classic City is one of the companies that we'll bring in when we're trying to do something on the technology side. So they assist us with building out websites that actually do something, because your website should actually do something.
It really should, yes.
It should do something. It should be more than a brochure. And we were talking before about, that kind of marketing seat, right? And so marketing people went to school to learn how to build ads and do communications and stuff. And all of a sudden they get this job and it's like, oh, by the way, there's all this other technology that's involved. And some of them may not know it at all, right?
Yeah.
And we see, because we do a lot of work with B2B companies that are doing merger and acquisition. So, it's like one company gobbling up another, and then there's different people and different technology and things like that. Do you see any best practices around the different parts that one group should own? So for example, the website. Is the website something that you see that the marketing team should fully own, or should the technology team at a company own it? Or is there someone else? Or CRM, who owns CRM? What do you see happen in that space?
I see mostly happen. This might be a little bit vague, but I feel like marketing should own most of everything that contributes to the marketing process.
Okay.
And I know that's a very kind of wide angle shot at that question. But if you have good communication between your marketing department and your sales team, which in reality should have consistent communication, because whatever is happening in sales should be reflected on whatever they're marketing. And if marketing has a pulse on how their systems are supposed to talk to one another and what data should be put into those systems so that the best decisions can be made, they're going to know what sales goals are. They're going to know what messaging and content's going to go out, and they're going to know what information needs to be coming in. And so perhaps underneath marketing, there should be different people that lead various different components depending on the size of your organization. So it just depends on how big that is. And going back to a little bit what we talked about before the break was, do you want to own the talent acquisition part of that process? Mm-hmm. And so should you have somebody that's over your CRM? Yes. Should you have somebody that's over your website? Yes.
That's the same person though, right?
But right, exactly, of course. Yes. But who?
No.
Yes, if you didn't catch that.
That was a joke. Okay, yes. Go ahead.
And so as long as that all funnels up under marketing, that's where the key piece is, because marketing should have a handle on how all those systems are working together and at least know how that's happening. So if you're going to be outsourcing your marketing, let that company handle all that. Now, you might have your own preferred system. That's great. Have a marketing company that can fit within that system, work within all the stuff you have that doesn't have to recreate the wheel. That's fine. But let one person or one organization own the stack and have divisions underneath that.
Yeah, and our experience with that has been, in companies where marketing has full control over the digital properties, like the marketing ecosystem, they are far more successful. They can get things done faster. They can make changes faster. Doesn't mean the marketing department has to do it, right?
Exactly.
If you've got a right partner or whatever, but if you got to put a ticket into IT to make a change to your website, there's a problem.
That's the biggest problem that we've seen, is that because of the technology aspect of some websites and systems, obviously is technology, it falls under the IT branch, and then nothing ever happens because nobody there wants to own that, we'll just call it creative space, even if it's not entirely.
Oh, and they destroy it
Oh,
creatively.
it is so bad.
Yeah, they're like, oh, you want to do this? Well, it doesn't. But it's like, yeah, but it's got to do that. That's what we're doing, right? Yeah, and the thing I see happening in companies, to like stand on my soapbox for a minute, is marketing is viewed as like the finance department or the IT, like where, oh, we're going to do the books every single month at the same time. And there's this one report we run and whatever. Marketing is way too fluid. You've got to be able to make a change. You've got to be able to adjust. Like Google will change a rule in a hot minute, social media changes, whatever. And so if the marketing team is handcuffed by, not having control over the properties, not being able to do what they need to do, not having the right team in place that knows how to do the things, then your marketing will never really be that effective.
And one of the things that we've actually seen recently in a couple of different scenarios is that marketing didn't even own the analytics around what was happening.
So they're being held accountable for something they don't know if it's even doing.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the analytics that they receive back were just like simple page views. And
page views do not matter. Page views are vanity metrics. Nobody cares.
Heat maps are the way for the win there. So yes, if you know what people are doing on a page, where they're scrolling to, what they're actually like attempting to click on that aren't clickable, heat maps are the win. And that's the biggest thing that I see
Heat
that
maps.
are missing on. I know that's not necessarily right now what we're talking about, but that's the thing I see missing in most small to medium-sized organizations.
Yeah.
When they're looking at their website analytics, they're looking at page views.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if I were to leave the agency world or the marketing, outsource marketing world and go corporate, I would insist on owning all parts of the marketing technology stack.
Yes.
Like I would want to own the websites and the digital property. I don't necessarily know that I'd care about the CRM, right? Like I'd want to maybe get stuff from it, but I would completely want to own all the digital properties and what I'm doing on that side, because if not, how are you effective? Right?
As long as you can connect into the CRM, that's pretty much what matters. And if as the head of marketing somewhere, as long as your hands aren't tied from a creative perspective to be able to go out and put content online, whatever that looks like, using whatever system that needs to be that's within your stack, then you can be successful there.
Yeah. And so as I start to put together that team, so I'm thinking about, okay, well now I've got to have technologists, and technologists can be an interesting group
They are.
to find and hire and retain. What are some of the tips you're seeing as you build, because you primarily, I know you do, but you've got a very steep technology team. Like what are some of the things you've seen?
So what I've seen a lot of is it's fairly easy within about 15 minutes to determine whether or not a person actually knows what they're talking about. There are a few key takeaways that I've learned over the years of interviewing so many people all the time. I don't need to necessarily spend an hour with each of these people. We may or may not talk to them again, but building out that bench is important. And so over time, and the more that you talk to people, the more you realize within about 15 or 20 minutes, you can pretty much figure out if at least they're full of junk or not. And so
but what are some of the indications of that?
Some of the indications, overuse of buzzwords without full sentences.
Right.
Like, I don't mean that entirely literally, but just the throwing out there of things. I've even talked to a person who, when I looked at their code, I copied and pasted snippets of their code into Google, and I found that they completely plagiarized their entire portfolio.
You can cut and paste snippets of code into Google? Wow, I learned something. Okay.
Yes, it's not the easiest thing, but yes, you can. And so that was that. So that's obviously a very easy thing to notate. And learning how they talk about their experience. And the people that talk about their experience in a problem solution form, even when there's very little experience to be had or showcased, if they're talking about it of how they solved a problem for somebody, that's typically a clear indication to me that they can think well through a problem. Yeah. So even if I'm interviewing for a more junior level role, if I can at least gauge their mindset of how they think through it, that helps with that, at least that initial gut. Are you worth a follow-up conversation later down the road?
Yeah, that's a good one, because And that kind of works even on the more design side that we stay on, because
Exactly.
if there's rigidity to this is the way I want to do it or my process versus, well, I'm trying to solve a problem, which may mean I need to be flexible within that category, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge part of it.
And ask, especially with creatives, like in terms of like traditional creative, in terms of art and design and things like that, looking at, they might have nice looking designs. It's great. But asking the simple question of why did you do that? Or one of the things I've noticed while looking at specifically web designers is consistency within the design. Do their buttons look the same?
Right.
And so noticing key points like that and calling out simple why-based questions on things along those lines really dig into that personality very quickly.
Yeah, it reminds me very much of there's the books Malcolm Gladwell, right? And so you've got
Yes.
both outliers. So, because you've done something for a period of time, you can kind of second nature see it, right? But also, and I think it's Blink. Blink is the one where,
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, even the people could walk in and look at a statue and be like, that's a fake. They couldn't tell you exactly why. They could just look at it and be like, that's not real, right?
Exactly.
So like those little, those spidey senses, right? Which I've told it is like ages you if you say that. But anyway,
Hey,
so
I like that alliteration, not alliteration. I like that because, hey, I'm a big Marvel fan myself. So
fan, okay.
I got you.
I'm not. I watched like that movie Where the World Ended.
Which one?
I don't know. There's one where the world ended. I watched it with my nephews, and it was 2 hours of my life. And at midnight, like the world had ended, and we were supposed to go to bed. And I was like, "This is terrible." It's like end war in
Endgame.
Okay,
And that one.
whatever.
You jumped in the middle.
It doesn't matter. You shouldn't watch a 2.5-hour movie and then be like, "That's like the end of Stranger Things." Like, oh,
I
shouldn't give anything
haven't
away.
seen it.
Okay, never mind. I won't say anything.
Don't spoil it.
I'm not going to spoil it. Sorry. I'm just glad there's another season. I thought it was the series finale, but it's not. There's at least going to be one more season. So, okay, with that, we're way off track. So, like, kind of gut sense, knowing, does it feel, does it smell right, those types of things. And then, knowing too that it's not one person. You have to have a team of people.
And that's where the culture fit comes in, and you get that once we do a couple of small projects together. And the nice thing about the way our company works is we can inject part-time people in very quickly and easily. And so we're pretty much never going to make a full-time decision, at least right now.
Try before you die.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so with the model that we have of kind of that slow growth in allows us, typically a few months.
Yeah. Well, and an advocacy for both of our companies, if you're a marketer out there, you hire us to do a thing for you, and you don't like something you get back, creative, writing, code, whatever, we replace that person on the back end. You didn't have to make a full-time hire. You didn't have to, there's very little risk. You just make a phone call and tell us this isn't working. And we're like, okay, I got another one.
Yeah.
And that, when you make that mistake and hire full-time into a big company, and then you got to go through all the HR people. We love you, HR people.
Yes, so much.
But you don't have that problem, right? You're like, you just put something in place and let us deal with that.
And all the onboarding and teaching pieces are lengthy at best.
Well, I also like the fact that we see so many things. So we can take something that we know worked in another situation that was close and then apply it into their space. And you've got people who may just be within your company. That's often a problem because they only know this kind of one way to do it. So
Even with the bad situations of, person X didn't deliver the quality of product that a particular client was looking for, it might just be, for lack of deeper terminology, aesthetics preferences.
Yeah.
And so you even learn from that to say, okay, yeah, that person doesn't fit that particular project.
Oh, absolutely.
But over here, if we sent that exact same thing to this person, they would have loved it.
Yeah, it's matchmaking. We're basically matchmakers.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like what designer goes with what client based on account manager. Like there's all that personality plays into it. It's such a huge part of it.
And one of the big things, kind of like this small by design framework, by having team members that are part-time. There's actually a person here in Atlanta named David Feldman who wrote a book called Small by Design. It's fantastic and really walks through the whole idea of using your size and your nimbleness as a big benefit of working with your company.
Yeah.
And it's not really, there's not really a detraction. It's hey, we can work with you. We can actually mold and shape where your missing pieces are.
Well, back in the day, and I won't tell anyone at the company, though I don't think they're around as that company anymore. So I was a technologist. I ran development shops. And we were brought into a company to become a skunkworks and they set us up. There were 17 of us,
Mm-hmm.
and their development shop was 600 people.
Ooh.
They had 600 people in their development shop. They also compensated their managers by the number of people they managed. So there was no incentive to like get rid of anybody, because then your comp would go down, right?
I've never heard of that before. That's wild.
Yeah, and so we had 17 people, and we would build stuff, and we just like 2 weeks. We were doing agile before agile was the thing, right?
Yeah.
And we would build something, and then I'd have to fly up and actually show that development team what we had built. They hated us because we would build stuff so fast, right? Because there was and here at Liger, we pod around certain clients, which allows people to have the second language and work through them, you know? So that's small by design, but doesn't necessarily mean you have to be small.
Exactly. You can have a ton of different people working in, like what you said, these pods. And that's what really works out well, is because you really get that, I can't think of the word I'm looking for right now, but that inherent knowledge base of that particular client. But it's also fun every so often, you know, once you've gotten into a rhythm and a groove, go grab a creative person from another team, shove them into the team for a couple of weeks and say, hey, let's get some fresh outside ideas in here. And that really, it invigorates the team that's been working on it for however long it's been.
I had that conversation this morning. We've got a project we're working on, and we've now done, we do Funlandias internally, and we've now done our third Funlandia. And I'm like, it's all going to be the same people for this. We need to put another person in the room because you've got our best ideas, right? Like we got to have another person. All right. Well, it was great having you. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. So yeah, Chris LaFay, he's with Classic City Consulting. They're a great partner with Liger. You've been listening to The Claw, which is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives, or the podcast. I don't know. I always say it wrong. The marketing podcast. I said it right. I did say it right.
Good job.
I did it right. Yeah. So thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Claw podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, rate and review this podcast. And if you or someone you know wants to make an appearance on this show, email us at yourbestie@ligerpartners.com.